But let me just say a warm welcome to everyone joining us now. We'll dive straight in. We are really excited to have you all here today, and we hope this is a valuable session for you and for your career going forward, hopefully with us at Zen Educate. So just so you know what this is all about, the purpose of this workshop is really to help you secure more roles in education by refining your profile. So how to make your professional profile as good and as compelling for schools as possible. And just to introduce myself and my co-host today, my name is Mick. I'm a former secondary school teacher, initially from South Africa. I taught history in high school for 3.5 years, and now I work at Zen Educate, and I'm the head of daily supply. And hosting with me today is Jason, who is he's basically a legend at Zen Educate. I don't know how else to put it. He's held numerous positions at a number of schools, and he's been supply teaching with us for just over a year now. And we're really, really lucky to have Jason sharing his expertise with us today. And so just a couple things to mention before we begin in earnest. We will be answering some frequently asked questions that you provided for us in the build-up to this webinar. But if you do have any questions that pop up along the way, please just type them into the chat, and then Jason and I will answer a selection of them, maybe some of the more repeated ones at the end of the workshop. And then on Monday the 8th, so a couple of days from now, you will receive a mail that has a link to the blog. That is a summary of everything we've covered here. So if I talk too fast or you miss anything, you will get all this information nicely summarized for you. And there will also be a link to the video of this workshop as well, in case you want to rewatch that. And last thing before we begin, just so you know, I'm afraid this is not a CPD accredited workshop, so there won't be a certificate for your attendance today. But nevertheless, we hope you find it informative and really, really valuable. And most of all, that it helps you refine your profile and help you find more work in the education world, whether you're a teacher, a TA, a cover supervisor, or you're just entering this career for the first time. So today, here's what we're going to focus on. We're going to talk briefly about why your professional profile matters, and then we'll break down the session into 3 parts. So that what are the 3 components of a professional profile? And those would be your profile questions, developing your CV, references, and then we'll end with Jason showing us how to use the app and then answering some questions from you guys. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So the first question, why does a good professional profile matter? So having a good professional profile matters very, very simply because it increases the chances of you finding work. The more professional, the more refined your profile is, the higher the chances of you finding work in general, of course, and definitely on our platform. And we'll share a little bit of experience with you there. So that is the top headline takeaway from today, is that the more refined and good your profile is, the more work you're going to get. And that's why we exist as a company, to help you guys find work. So let's look at the components of a good professional profile. I'll talk generally before we talk specifically about the Zen app. So the components of a good professional profile, regardless of the field you're in, comprise these 3 things. So you've got a cover letter, which explains how right you are for the role, some of your experience maybe. Then you've got your CV, which I'm sure you all know what that is, and we'll delve deeper into that now. And then thirdly, you've got your references. So generally, those 3 things, regardless of where you're applying for work, your employer or your potential employer is going to ask you for those 3 things. And now at Zen, when you've registered with us on the app, what do those 3 things look like for us here? So in place of your cover letter, you've got your profile questions. And these are just a series of questions that we've outlined for you to answer to really show off the best of your abilities to schools. And then the CV is the same. We ask you for as up-to-date a CV as you can possibly get. And then we ask you for references. So the only real difference between a general application and a Zen application is that your cover letter is replaced by your profile questions. And really that's the main difference. And of course, it's all on the app and easy for schools and senior leaders at schools to access so that they can request you for work. So that's the 3 components of a profile. And what we're going to do in this session is we're just going to walk you through each of those different components and show you how to make them as good as they possibly can be so that you can find the work that you want. So firstly, I want to show you the equivalent of the cover letter on the app. So this is what your profile questions look like. And so from a school's perspective, when they click on your profile, this is what they'll see. There's an About You section where someone from Zen Educate has provided a brief summary after your interview with us. And what we encourage all our staff to do is to then take the time to answer those questions yourself and go as in-depth as possible with those questions. Obviously try to be succinct, and again we'll talk about making answers good and succinct all at the same time. But we encourage you please to go to your profile and answer those questions, and that's very easily accessible whether you use the web browser or the app. And so again, these two examples on screen are what a school sees when they log into your profile to look at you. So as you work on your profile, the best thing to do is to take the mindset of a school leader looking to hire someone and think to yourself, would I hire someone whose profile looked like this? And so even at a glance, if you look at these two profiles here, it's really not that hard to tell which of these profiles demonstrates to a school that a candidate is professional and committed and diligent and genuinely interested in growing their career. And I've hopefully indicated that with a smiley face and a thumbs up, or a sad face and a thumbs down. The one on the left expresses in detail their experience, how they've supported children with special educational needs, and really in detail how they'd be an asset to a school. And the one on the right, there's nothing wrong with it. It just is only a little more than a summary, a real top line summary of their career, and doesn't go into much detail. And again, I think as you work on your profiles, what does a head teacher, what does a principal want to see? They probably want to see you unpack a bit and get into a bit of the meat of your experience. So curating your profile and these profile questions So creating your profile matters because the more a school likes the look of you, the higher the chances of them requesting you for supply work and long-term roles. So I'll just say this, take the time to thoroughly answer these questions. And we've given you the sorts of questions that schools want to know more about. And this isn't to say, though, that a long profile is necessarily a better profile, because quality will always trump quantity. But it is to say that schools are looking for proactive, engaged staff. And one way to demonstrate that to them is by taking the time to answer these questions. And then another thing on this, the question of profiles, is that you might not think of it this way, but taking the time to develop your professional profile and curate it in this way is actually an exercise in professional development. Because reflecting and being able to succinctly summarize your answers to these questions is an investment in your career, because these are the sorts of questions, and I'm sure Jason will testify to this, that these are the sorts of questions that head teachers will ask you when you go to an interview. They'll say, explain to me your classroom practice. How do you handle challenging behavior in the class? Give me an example of supporting a child on the autistic spectrum. They'll ask you these things. And so if you're able to succinctly summarize these things in writing, they can see that there, and then it's good practice for when you go to an interview. So in short, it's worth taking the time to make your profile excellent, as it will increase the chances of schools selecting you for short-term or long-term work, and it will benefit you in the long run. So as you work more with Zen, there are different elements that you can add to your profile to make it stand out to the crowd. So here we go on to the next thing. How can you make your profile look ideal? What are some of the different things that our app offers you? So I won't go into it again, but we've already explained the importance of writing up your questions. And here are just a few examples of things that you can get on your profile as well. So if you look on the top left, you'll see a series of badges. And as you work in schools, schools can nominate you for badges. So we send feedback emails to schools, and then they respond to say, hey, Jason was so good at behavior management. He was brilliant at communication with staff. Look at his professionalism in his nice blue shirt. He looked great. He was punctual. Schools can nominate you for these badges that then other schools can see when they request you as well. So they'll be thinking, oh, I know this year 6 class can be a bit challenging sometimes, but oh look, Jason's been nominated by 3 or 4 schools for his excellence in behavior management. He's the right candidate. So adding these to your profile by doing well in schools will really make your profile shine. And if you look just below those badges, schools can also leave feedback on your profile that then you can publish. And just below that, again, they can also, if they aren't going to write a summary of how well you did, they can pick certain aspects so that they can say things like, oh, you were brilliant, you're creative and lively, really responsible, the children loved you. So those are some of the things that schools can give you. And a really important feature of your profile as well is that your calendar is up to date. And so the more active you are on the app, in other words, the more you engage with your calendar and say, oh, I'm not available this day, I am available this day, the higher you will feature in the searches that schools make, because schools are looking for candidates who are active on the app and who they know that if I request that person, they will actually respond. So schools are looking for candidates with up-to-date calendars because that they know they can rely on them to respond to their requests. And then I'm just going to hand over to Jason, who's got a good profile himself, and he's going to explain to us some of his top tips for making your profile really shine to schools.
Thanks very much, Mick, and thanks for the kind words as well. And a pleasure to be a part of the workshop today. Yeah, so pretty much I would say that the profile is the most important aspect. It's really a snapshot of you as a supply teacher. So I think if you can be as thorough, I think it's probably more the key point really, as thorough as possible. So making sure that everything has been completed. So checking when you've completed everything, that it's all, everything's been included in there. So I'll start with quite simply having a nice professional photo. I mean, so that they can see you really clearly, just to sort of get a sort of an impression of you, looking friendly. And that sort of includes the video as well. So a video would be really, really useful, because my video, I'm a little bit nervous about doing one initially. However, I've had a few comments from some of the schools saying, oh, we really liked your video. You came across as really, really nice, and you know, a very good candidate, somebody that we would like to have at our school. So I think that's really, really important. Try to be as detailed as you can when you are listing all of your past experience, particularly the year groups that you've taught in. For myself, as in terms of my experience, I've done from year 1 to secondary, but my preference really is primary. However, I've listed them all when I first started with Zen, because I just thought, wow, it's going to widen my chances of getting more work. So I wasn't excluding anything. And also any posts that you might have held, especially in primary school, there will often be posts like head of music, head of geography. Some schools really like this because they're looking for a specific subject, experienced people, especially people that have got a background in geography, and especially music's quite a good one as well. Make sure that when you upload your CV that it's really, really that it's the most current one, because often we forget to update our last experience, so schools can really see sort of what you've been up to. That will be uploaded, and then they can normally click on your profile and access that. A very clear summary of you as a teacher, just sort of detailing your key strengths. Normally when I joined Zen, one of the colleagues at Zen, he did that for me. However, I did talk him through that, so that's something that you can discuss as well. As Mick touched upon earlier, there's some questions in there. If you're looking for more sort of long-term positions, things like describe your behavior management strategy. What would be your way of dealing with a difficult class? So try and be as focused and detailed as possible, because I think that really does give schools an indication of the kind of candidate that you are. So try and think of as many examples as good examples as you can think of, and I think that does really impress people when they're looking at that particular section. Schools I've been to, some of them have been kind enough to give me some feedback, and that they have then forwarded it as something to be published. So you do have the option to publish it. You can read it beforehand, and then that can be uploaded onto your profile. Obviously, it will be nice feedback that you probably want to include. But often that's a very good tool for the profile, because that will show your sort of how good you are, and also it sort of builds up your profile and makes it a very, very strong profile. And as Mick mentioned earlier as well, there's the badges that often the schools will give you a rating for those as well, and that will come up in your profile as well as that. Also, lastly, but not by any means less important, but SEN experience is really, really vital, because often many schools, in comprehensive schools or inclusive schools, will have lots of needs with children that will need some support. So if there's any experience that you might have come across, even if you haven't explicitly taught it or haven't dealt with or put anything in place for those children, I think it's quite good to include, because there will be lots and different complex needs and vulnerable children. And I think schools will really, really think that's a great thing. So just try and be as detailed as possible, really. So yeah, that's my main tips, really. There are lots of things to include, but I think just being really, really clear and detailed, approachable, and just to look very friendly. It's my top tips.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jason. We really appreciate your input. And we've finished number 1, which is curating your profile questions, which again is the equivalent of your cover letter that goes out to a school, a really important aspect of your profile. Next is something we're probably all a bit more familiar with, which is our CVs. So I'll just quickly walk you through what are some elements that make up a great CV. So here we go. I've tried to make it easy to remember. So I've put it under 3 headings that all start with the letter C. I'm not sure if we can head over to the next slide there, Ross. Brilliant, thanks very much. So the first thing is aim for a clear structure and layout. So one tip here is please keep it simple. We look at a lot of CVs through our app, and believe me, we've seen some of the most bizarre CVs you could imagine. I've honestly seen a CV that the writing of the person's experience went in a spiral that got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and that's how they submitted their CV. And of course, a school leader doesn't really have the time to follow a spiral of your experience. So really aim for simplicity. Simple works when it comes to a CV. Less is more, really, is a good takeaway here. And when you compile a CV, you're always aiming to do your work experience first and your education after that. And when you are putting your work experience in, you're always putting your most recent work experience at the top. So it works like that. So experience in the workplace, education, and always working from most recent to least recent. So the first C is we're looking for clarity on a CV. Next thing is we're looking for it to be comprehensive. So we don't want there to be any gaps, and we do want it to be, as I said, in chronological order. And importantly, even though I've used the word comprehensive, I don't mean there that you write down everything that has ever happened to you in the classroom or in any other job or in your university or college or wherever you got your qualification. I just mean that we would like you to cover every aspect and make sure that the timeline makes sense. And what you do cover is covered in a succinct way. So some of the things that we think you should put on your CV would be the responsibilities of your role, not just the description. In other words, if you taught Year 5, don't just say Year 5 teacher for 2018 to 2019. Explain some of the key responsibilities. Were you involved in curriculum development? Were you involved in in a pastoral role? Were you involved on the sports field or something like that? Just so schools can see what you've done and they know what you haven't done. It's good to be honest in that sense. Really good to include some of your proudest moments and your key achievements from working at the school. This is important because it shows a school that you can do well, not just do the bare minimum, and more so that you want to continue to do well and want to achieve wherever you go. I'm sure schools are keen to hire people who are ambitious, who are striving to lead grades, lead curriculum development, lead extracurricularly, if that's even a word. Sorry if I made that up, but they want to see that you strive, that you want to do well, and that you take pride in your work. So it's important to give clear examples of the results of your work and the impacts of your work, and Jason will walk us through a framework of that in a few minutes. So it's also good to include other achievements and some of your other interests. So if you're good at music or sport or cooking, any additional skills, especially if you're looking for a long-term role at a school, you may feel a bit sheepish to put something like that in a CV. But remember that, especially for longer-term roles, schools hire people. They don't just hire teachers. They hire the whole person that they see. So if you've got experience working with children or young people in extracurricular activities or something of that nature, it's good to put it in some way in the CV to show the school that there's different facets to you. You're not just churning out academic work and marking and that sort of thing. So it should be comprehensive, as I've said, clear. And the last C is that it is important to be concise. And this, I think, is probably the hardest thing of a CV. And we would say that aim for your CV to be 2 pages. That's more than enough. As soon as it becomes longer than that, with little mini essays under each section and summaries of university or college, it's very, very unlikely that a senior leader at a school has the time or the inclination to read a CV that's 4, 5, 6 pages long. So the key here is not writing everything down, but reflecting on your different experiences and recording the best examples of your achievements in as succinct a way as possible. That's really the key. And I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but it's really, really rewarding and will make your CV really shine if you are able to be both comprehensive and concise. But that takes work. And so onto the next slide. How do you begin to do that? Because that's quite a task, actually, to try to sum up your whole career into a couple pages. And so our first tip is try to put aside some time to do it, and expect it to take some time, especially if you're starting from scratch. Be prepared that this could take you a while. Budget some time to do it properly. An empty afternoon or maybe 2 or 3 evenings is probably the right amount of time to get it perfect and down to the right size, that it's short and punchy. And you are going to need to be ruthless about what goes in and what stays out. Remember, you're looking to highlight the best things about each experience, not just every experience you've ever had. And also important to remember that a CV is for someone else. It's not for you. It's for that head teacher that's looking to recruit you. So what do they want to know about you? What's the best thing that you can tell them about each of your experiences that would make them want you in the school? That's the lens to think through. And the last one, the last bit of feedback is a hard one. But don't be afraid to pass your CV to someone you know, maybe a colleague, a former colleague who you trust, and say, hey, is this any good? Is this too long? Are my examples weak? Are they strong? Where can I improve? It's really good to get feedback from trusted colleagues and friends, and they will help you refine your CV. And the more honest they are with you, the better your CV will be. The better your CV will be, the higher the chance of you finding work. So it's worth a little bit of social awkwardness, and it's worth the time to get your CV right. And I hope that those tips help you on the start of that journey. And again, I'm just going to hand over to Jason to explain a framework that will help you show the impact of your teaching.
Okay, so when looking for especially long-term roles, the most important thing really is, are you able to teach? And that's the crux of it really, is what is going to be the impact of your teaching and your ability to teach on the learning. So what things are going to come out of that? That's what schools are inevitably looking for. They want to see that their children, their pupils, are going to benefit from you being there. So you have to sort of really look and sort of think. It's quite hard. It was sort of a challenge for me to think about, actually, because I've been teaching for 11 to 12 years now. So try and summarize in a few examples is very difficult. However, I just thought of one example where it felt that there was quite a lot of things that came from this situation, and it was kind of almost like just by chance, really, but I thought of a particular experience that I had. So I started with thinking about the issue of what happened in this particular school that I joined. I was there for a number of weeks. There was quite a few challenges there. I then thought about, what did I do to bring about change, or to have some impact in what I did at my time there. And then how could I evidence that? How did I know that the children were learning? What were the results? What things did I bring about? So I'll just run you through what I did come up with. This was one of the examples that I thought about quite some time ago. Should be on the next slide. So this was one of my examples. So I, quite some time ago now, in a school in East London, there was a year one class that was needing a teacher to replace somebody who was off sick. I had never taught year one before, so it was quite I was a little bit reluctant at first, but then thinking about, I always love a challenge. So I just thought, wow, this could be some good learning for me, because I've only ever taught year 5 and 6 up to this point. So I went in first thing in the morning, very, very enthusiastic, very up for the challenge. I could see that the children hadn't made, from teaching throughout the first day, I could see they hadn't made a lot of progress. There was clearly some gaps in their maths and English that needed resolving. A very, very sweet class. They were very, very enthusiastic, very a lovely bunch of children. So it wasn't, the behaviour wasn't an issue. It was definitely the learning that was an issue there. And the school were in extra measures, so that obviously wasn't helping the issues, because I think there was a lot of things that weren't in place there, unfortunately. So I did feel that the children were suffering a little bit with having the teacher that had been off for a little while, sort of on, but the person was in and then off and in and off. So I felt that their learning had been a little bit disrupted. So there was also a Christmas concert that was due to be organised, because this was the run up to Christmas. So they did ask if I would be happy to lead on that. So again, I felt a little bit panicked, but again, I just took on the challenge. So what I did do, these were some of the solutions I came up with. So I love to come up with solutions. It's one of my key things as a teacher. Don't have a problem, but create a solution. So I adapted from all my experience, really, being, because I started off as secondary, I went from secondary to primary school. So something I'm quite good at doing is just adapting very quickly. You bring all the knowledge together that I've got, and just coming up with a sort of a common sense approach, really, of what I could do to help these children. Having taught SEN as well, lots of SEN, I had lots of groups in my previous school. I just devised some resources. I thought about a really good scheme of English work that they could use. I knew what was really effective, because through teaching lots of English in primary, you always come across lots of different resources and lots of different books, lots of training that I've been on about finding, using imagery as basically as like a hook, as something to bring the children in and get them to look at the images, and then come up with some description of what they see. Normally music's quite a good way as well, lots of audio, lots of visual. So again, you bring them together, all the training that I've had over the years. I created this piece of this scheme of work to help them with their English work. And then the Christmas show was something that I've always been quite into as well. I've been doing lots of end of school year 6 productions with my other colleagues. So that's something that I've always sort of taken on the challenge of as well. So again, doing a little bit of choreography, lots of singing, dancing. So there were 2 other teachers in the same year group. It was a 3-form entry. They were supply. So I just said, okay, you know what, I'm happy to lead on this. I can do it, because this is an area that I'm really quite interested in. So I led the English work, the Christmas program, songs and dances. And through doing all of that, I could see, looking at their English books and seeing, when I was questioning them, I could see that they were starting to develop a very basic understanding of using description, and using poetry as well really helped with rhyming, repetition, adjectives. And then I started to bring out a little bit more higher order stuff like similes, because I knew that that's something that they could do just through using a few words, because poetry can be quite good for doing that as well. It just brings that, even for children that have English as an additional language, they just need to find a few words that can really, really generate lots of understanding. The Christmas concert again also was very successful in the end. Lots of the SLT were very, very happy, given all this situation of being extra measures. They had a lot of stress, so they were very happy that it was very successful, and parents were very happy as well. So yeah, a very good experience, and that was quite a nice example that I thought of, and the one that always stays with me, because I remember just going off for traveling before then as well. So I remember loving, I thought, oh, I've done a really good job here, and also having learned how to teach year one as well, which was also a really, really nice experience. So just thinking of a nice example, something that telling a bit of a story really as well, and starting with what happened, how you solved it, and how can you evidence the impact that you made. So yeah, so hopefully that example would be very useful for you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much, Jason. That is a really helpful example. Good to see how you filled out the framework of issue, solution, evidence. Really powerful way of showing schools on your CV, and doesn't need to be very long. You can get that into a nice punchy paragraph. If you've taken the time to craft that, it'll make a huge impact on your CV. So we've done the first two now of the three elements of a professional profile. So we've covered the profile questions, we looked at CVs, and now we're getting on to the references, which is the third and the final thing. So we know from our experience of vetting candidates, which is a way of saying just making sure we do all the necessary checks so that you're able to work in a school, that getting references right is sometimes the trickiest and the slowest part of the vetting process. So as part of our effort to help you get your profile to shine to schools, we thought we'd explain how to make your references correct, because if they're the wrong ones or the wrong type of references, it can really slow down the process of getting you out to work. And we'd love to see that process go really swiftly for each of you on this call. So firstly, when it comes to references, they must cover at least the 2 years before the time of your interview with us. And we ask that you provide 2 or more if you need others to cover that period. So it's 2 people, because schools want to hear more than just one voice that can vouch for you. And it's 2 years because schools want to see that you are consistently able to perform, consistently able to do your job, or at least see that there's a theme in the work that you've chosen. And the references should be professional references, not character references, please. Unfortunately, schools are not interested in references who can only vouch for your character. So, you know, it can't be a family member, a member of a religious community that you're a part of, and it shouldn't even be a peer or a colleague of yours at work. So when it comes to getting reference from work, so sometimes this is where the process is slowed down, is people get someone who is a peer of theirs to act as a reference. So me as a teacher gets Jason also as a teacher to act as my reference. Now that is, strictly speaking, a professional reference, but isn't actually the type of reference that a school is interested in. They are looking for someone who is in leadership at that organization or at that school. So in other words, if you were a TA in the reception, another TA can't be your reference. It's got to be someone like the head of year or a deputy or a head. And what we have seen is candidates who manage to get references from senior leaders in the school, so deputies or heads, do extraordinarily well with schools. But we understand that this is probably not something everyone is able to do, especially if you're quite early on in your career. So we do understand that is something not everyone will be able to do. The next thing is that it's really important that the references that you give us match your CV. So schools are looking for consistency. They need to see that the timelines of your references actually match the timelines of the work that you've mentioned or the study that you've mentioned. And I should have mentioned that earlier. You can use academic references if you're coming out of university or college. That's perfectly acceptable. So they want to see that it matches what you have on your CV. Otherwise, it does just look a little bit shifty. If it looks as if you're trying to hide something or get a reference for someone that you didn't actually work for, and it all just looks a bit strange when a head teacher looks at your references and looks at your CV and says, these two don't actually interact correctly. So please make sure when you do the CV, it's up to date and the references reflect what's on there. It's important as well that you explain any gaps in your employment. And it's totally fine here to be honest. because gaps in employment raise questions for employers who are looking to hire you. So it's okay to explain what the gaps are, even if it is something like, from Jan to July, I was out of work and looking for work. That's a perfectly acceptable thing to have on a CV. Rather have that than for 6 months, the person's thinking, or the six-month gap on your CV, and then the senior leader looking at that CV thinks, what is this person trying to hide? And there's no reference from this period, so maybe they were fired from somewhere. It's better to be honest, even if it says looking for work or paternity leave, maternity leave, whatever it is. It's good to be honest and have that, just so that it's chronologically accurate and there aren't any gaps. So that covers references, and I hope that all makes sense. And let me just say, getting references right will accelerate the process of getting you verified on the platform. It's a necessary check we have to run so that you're able to work in schools. And so if we get this right, it will speed up the process and speed up the time it takes for schools to be able to actually view you and then request you for work. So that brings us to the end of our overview of how to make your professional profile as squeaky clean and as attractive to schools as possible. And I just want to hand over to Jason again, who's going to explain some of the different aspects of using our app, which is really key in you actually not just having a good profile, but then accepting the work and making sure you're in the right place to get work once you are ready with your profile. Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, so the app really is essentially what Zen's all about, is using the app. And that's one of the first things I noticed that was different from other places I'd worked at, is that the app seemed to be much more quicker and efficient at doing everything, like automated. I was quite wowed at the start. Oh wow, this is quite a nice, an easier way for me just to be able to sign up. And that was initially what I noticed. So after I registered, I started getting some bookings, and so I knew that I'd succeeded and pressed Zen. So that was quite a nice start. When they first came through, they normally started off as a text message, and then often there was a link on there. So it said that normally would say what the school, which school it was, which date, and that's why the calendar is so important, to make sure that that you are being as accurate as you can as to your availability. So if there are days where you're not available, then that's a really good idea to go back and make sure that you've put yourself as unavailable. And so from the calendar, the schools will often be able to see when you're available, and that's when the bookings will come in. So the information, so with the booking, is an accept or decline, and then you can often see on there that where the school is, lots of information. So you can see where in London. Often it's going to be London, but there are some places in Manchester that we do as well, in Birmingham. You can see roughly what kind of behaviour. So they will say good. According to Ofsted, it will be good or outstanding. The Ofsted rating, so you can see what kind of school, if you're going to be going to one with extra measures, you're going to expect there's going to be possibly some issues there with organisation or with behaviour. How you should be dressing, so obviously smart or casual. Roughly what time you'd have to go to work there, what time you should be there. Often I would go just before the time it did say on there. So if it did say 8:30, I would never just go for 8:30. I would go 8 o'clock or 8:15, just to make sure that the schools had enough time to be able to, because often school teachers will be running off, going to their insets and not having much time to really explain to you. So I've just showed a little that you're very organised and punctual. Any parking facilities will often be on there as well. So if you're going to drive there, would you be able to park there? That's all really, really useful to know, and how much your rate of pay will be that's been agreed. So that will be on there. And again, going back to the calendar, that will show you when you're going to be available. And that's something you will discuss with the colleagues at Zen. So if you're not going to be available, you can on the app put a reason in there why you're not going to be available, and then you can put that onto your profile, and then you can then sort of block some dates that you, let's say you're going to a wedding, or you've got something else coming up, you can just have those days off. So it's a lot easier to use. You can see past bookings as well that you have done. So if you've kind of forgotten the schools that you, when you get a booking coming through, you go, oh, I remember going to that school before. Oh, I really like that school. So then you can look back, because it just by obviously clicking the back arrow, it will tell you all the previous schools that you've been at on the exact day, and you can just click on them. So you can see on the bottom of this slide there, there's, well, obviously the name's been blanked out, but you could, it will be able to allow you to click on it, and you'll be able to see some basic information about those schools that you've already done, and also any upcoming work that you're going to be doing or that you've confirmed. That will come up on there as well. So it just gives you lots and lots of control. You can see what you're going to be doing. So you can also manage your time as well, and it allows you to basically plan your life, because once you have days that you're not able to do, you can fit your work around that. So the app is really, really, really good for that. And I've always found it really useful, because I like to have just everything's in one place, and that's what essentially what's good about the app with Zen, is that it does allow you that ease of use and access. And also, as well as that, there is a jobs tab. So when you go onto the app, there's a little, I was on the left side, it'll be quite clear when you see on there, but it'll just, so you just click on that, and there will be normally some information about any job roles that are often within the sort of the location that you've specified. So there will be a little tab on there as well that will say I'm interested, so you can click on that, and then what will happen is that will be then sent off, which will give you, so you'll hear back about some of those. So that's the jobs section. So also in addition, so that's a really, really, really good, useful. So rather than calling up Zen, have you got any jobs today? Is there anything it's all going to be there for you to have a look at. So just again, it puts it into your hands. It gives you that control, and allows you to just to have a, you know, if you've got a bit of time and you want to have a look, and you've got a moment just to spare, you can have a look at some of those jobs, take a look at what they're looking for. So it's a really, really useful part of the app.
Nice, thanks Jason for running us through that, and I hope each of you listening, if you're using the app, that was helpful in helping you just get your head around some of the different features and how to position yourself well for long-term roles or short-term roles, because that's why we are here. So we're going to move on to the final section, which is just some questions and answers. We'll start with some of the common questions that came up, and then we'll address some of the questions that you've been putting into the chat that we can see here. So the first one is, can you give us some tips for performing well in an interview? I'll give you a quick 3, and then I'll hand over to Jason to see if he's got some ideas as well. So first thing I think for preparing well for an interview, or performing well in an interview, is to firstly be as prepared as possible. So research the school you're going to, show how prepared you are, and by showing your interest in the school. Come ready to answer questions about your experience, and as we mentioned under the CV section, come with some really, really good examples fresh in your head so that you aren't stumped on the spot. Because for the most part, you can predict the questions they might ask. If you're, if you're going for a teaching assistant role, they might say, explain to me how you've supported a child who has got this sort of special educational need. Or if you're a teacher, maybe say, explain to me how you've gone about planning. And so you should know there's only so many questions you might be asked, and so you can prepare for that. And it's a particular interest, particularly important, I think, to know a lot about the school that you're going for to show your interest in the role. So come prepared. Secondly, I think it's good to be very honest. Schools hire, as I said earlier, schools are hiring people, not robots, or people that just churn out academic work. They want to see that you are humble, that you've got a willingness to learn, that you've got an ability to reflect on some of your past mistakes. And so you don't need to pretend to be perfect. You do just need to be honest and show that even when you've made mistakes in the past, you're able to learn and grow and proceed in your career. And thirdly, this is, I think, an underrated aspect of interview preparation is make sure that you come with some good questions for them as well. Because if you're able to ask big questions of the school leaders, it shows that you've got the bigger picture in mind, that you're thinking about the welfare of the whole school, about the children, about the families. And if you're able to ask questions like that, you leave with them thinking, "Whoa, that person's got a much bigger picture in mind," rather than just, "Can you teach year 3? Yes, I can." You'll leave with a very different perception left with those staff, I think, if you come with good questions prepared as well. So be prepared, be honest, ask good questions are some of my top tips. Jason, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I mean, with just being really prepared really is really, really important, because when I came for my interview, because I came in before COVID, so I remember just having everything ready as well, because there was a lot of things that I needed to bring, just being very organized and just showing that you're very keen and you're very interested, and just being sort of relatable as well, and sharing any experiences that you've got, even silly little things that you might not think are important that often can be important, especially with experience, because obviously often there will be people that don't have a lot of experience, but however they've had experience in other fields and other areas that that do relate to education, because if it's anything where it's caring, or even being a job, coming on to the second question actually, but being a coach or being a captain of some sort, I think all these things can be are really important, and just being very clear and explaining. I think these are some of the things that I think are very important.
Cool, thanks, Jason. Let's head on to the next one. So how do I get a job in education if I don't have much experience or any experience working within a school? That's a really good question, especially if you're a career changer, or you're coming out of secondary education or tertiary education and you're looking to work in a school. The best way to think about it is I'll use an example from the British Civil Service, and that what they do if you are looking for a job in the civil service is they don't look at your education or even really at your CV. They look at competencies. So in other words, they look at whether or not you can do some of the core skills of the job, regardless of your education. So it doesn't matter if you've got a PhD or all you got is GCSEs or A levels or something like that. They want to know that you can do the skills of the job, not that you went to the right university or something like that. So let's use that same logic. So I want you, if you are coming new into this, to imagine what the responsibilities are of a teacher, of a teaching assistant, of a cover supervisor. What are the key responsibilities of those roles? And then where in your life have you demonstrated that same competency, that same ability to do that thing that you think that a school would want? So it doesn't have to be in a classroom, but let's say they're looking for something like leadership or adaptability, or ability to think under pressure. Where in your life have you done those things? And if you can get a good example of that and put that on a CV, then that's usually a good thing for a school to see. Even if it's not in the classroom, you just take the same competencies and good examples showing that you can lead, you can be adaptable, you can think under pressure, and that you believe you can apply that in the classroom. I think that will take you a long way.
Yeah.
Great. Jason, do you want to answer the non-education qualifications?
Yeah, so I think with before I even started teaching, I wasn't really sure how to really sound myself. This is when I started my PGCE. So there were lots of things in there that related to to the job I wanted to do, because at the time I was teaching business studies. So there were lots of jobs in there that were non-education based. However, they were in business, and there were some supervisory roles in a supermarket that I worked in. So there can be lots of different things that you can use in there that could be very useful. I think the important thing with CVs is that you express what the skill was that you learned or that you did. Again, it's like, as Mick mentioned, it's not always just about where you worked or how long you were there for. I think as long as it has an important skill in there, because there can be so many different things, dealing under pressure, being able to manage people as well. So anything in there that's really crucial to the job you want to apply for. So include it if it's really, really useful, especially if you're quite new to it as well. If you're quite new to teaching or becoming a TA, include anything in there that has relevant experience or skills that you can definitely apply. That's my sort of advice really on that part.
That's great. And I think, Jason, that probably answers the next question as well. Can you use your experience in teaching online lessons or tutoring online, or maybe if you've only come to education in the last year, as long as we've been in lockdown, you may only have online teaching experience, and that's no less valuable as long as you're able to demonstrate that you have that experience by, I think, using Jason's framework. What was the issue? What did you solve? What was the impact of that? And then schools will be able to see that you have those skills, you have those competencies, and that will translate onto your CV in a really nice way. And then the last question on here before we go to some of the ones that you've typed in for us is, what does a head teacher look at in the first 20 seconds of reviewing a profile? And are there any keywords or highlights I should focus on? That's a really good question. Whoever came up with that one. And I'm afraid I have never been a head teacher. And Jason, I'm not sure you've been a head teacher either, but we have dealt with a lot of head teachers, and so we do know a couple of things that they're looking for. And so here's what I think you could put in. I took down a few notes. Is just clearly outlined experience. So if you've been teaching for 20 years or for 6 months, it's just state that somewhere nice and simply. I've been a teacher for 6 years or whatever it is, just so that they can see that. SEN experience is really crucial as well, because in a lot of schools, particularly in London, where there's lots of different types of areas with different types of needs, you're going to need to show that you can interact with every different child in the class. So outlined experience, SEN experience. I think then if you've had any leadership experience, that's really good to put on the CV, nice and clearly, and then to highlight your key strengths. So I've said these phrases before, but adaptability, preparedness, that sort of thing, leadership. If you could include that in nice, not necessarily put it in bold text, but if you're able to use those keywords, show a school that you're a cut above the rest. You're not just there to teach and then leave. I think that's good. Jason, would you have anything to add there?
Yeah, all the things you've said, definitely. And also, there was one particular school that I was at recently, and the main thing they said to me is, we looked at your profile, you just look very nice, you look like a nice person, you just have very good behavior management, and that's really what we wanted. And we wanted someone we can trust, someone who's got good experience, very strong with behavior. And that's where your badges and your reviews come in really, really handy, because they will often look at those, often just have a look at maybe watch your video, and then make a decision if they want to book you or not. So I think that was the key thing for a lot of schools I've been at, because as we know, schools are very, very busy places. And I think in the morning, they've got that sort of laborious task of being able to find somebody. So they don't really want to troll through lots of profiles, and that's why Zen's really, really good, because often they would just see a profile. Oh, perfect, we'll book him. Good behavior, good experience of teaching from year 1 to year 6. Perfect. So I think just what you've taught, behavior, and just so they get a bit of a snapshot of who you are from your picture and the video that you have on there.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. We're just going to answer now before we conclude, some questions you've messaged into us. And so now's your last chance. If you have any others that you want to shoot over, we'll try and get to them before we sign off and say thanks for coming. So I'll start off with a very easy one, which I think some of you may have missed it when we said it earlier, but we've been asked how many pages should your CV be? We recommend that your CV is no longer than 2 pages. I think that that's probably, with some good examples and your work experience summed up and your education, 2 pages is around about the good thing. And again, I'm not saying it's easy to get it down to 2 pages, but I'm saying that a well done CV can be 2 pages and really effective to read. So aim for 2 pages on the CV. Then we had a question here. It says, regarding updating my CV, should I mention all of the work which I've done in schools or just the work I've done at Zen Educate? We would say here, it's not just about us. Please include your entire work history. As I said, it's comprehensive is good. Not that you write everything down, but that you do show where you have been since you started your career, since you left whatever education you did. So please, not just what you've done with us, everywhere. Another one about references. Does a line manager from a voluntary role count as a professional or character reference? That's a really, really good question. I guess that sort of falls in between the gaps. It's not purely a character reference, provided that person is not related to you in some way. That would muddy the waters a bit. But you can use, let's see, for example, we have accepted references from people who have volunteered maybe at a religious organization, a church or a mosque, from someone who is an official leadership of that organization. If you've been volunteering, supporting children or elderly or something of that in that capacity, we will accept someone who again is in leadership of that organization. I think the important thing there is in leadership and not personally related to you. Otherwise, that is a tricky thing. A third one here, how do you update references? This one's a nitty-gritty one, so I'll just explain the platform here. So how do you update references or remove old ones and add new ones to the platform? So you have, when you sign up with us, you are able to input your references there. You can do up to 4 at the first go. After that, we'll contact them. If you need to change them for whatever reason, the best thing to do would either be to contact the person you've been in contact with to progress your vetting and your process through to verification, or you can email, and maybe Ross, you can put this in the chat so people can see. It would be support@zeneducate.com. So SUPPORT @zeneducate.com. That is the best place to email, and then someone on our team will pick that up, add that to your profile, and contact the new references. Sorry, Jason, that I'm hogging the answers.
Yeah.
But
I've seen one I can definitely answer.
Do you want to nab that one? And
yeah,
people can stop listening to my voice.
Question 5. Question 5. It says, does the the Zen app tell us about the behaviour policy for each of the schools? Sort of in short, really, when you go onto the app, it won't tell you you won't be able to see the behaviour policy, but it will there will be a summary of what type of policy they have. So basically, that would be, for example, they might have we only have a hands up or hands down policy. We might have only positive reinforcement. Some schools have a handshake as they come in. They will often just summarize it with just a sentence or a few words of what sort of way that they operate there. Is it very positive? So what you would need to do when you go to the school is ask them, because often when I go in first thing in the morning with my notepad, I'll write down what is the behaviour policy, where is it, so can you show me in the classroom? And then most of them will have a traffic light system often, and then what is the positive, so you can reward any children on that day. But you can also look up, before you go to the school, you could look up at their website. They may sometimes have the behaviour policy on there, but often the app will give you an idea of how the school manages the behaviour, and then that will inform you whether you want to accept or decline. But with the Ofsted rating as well, so if the Ofsted rating is outstanding, you'll often find that the behaviour there is pretty good, because they won't get outstanding if their behaviour isn't of a good standard. So hope that answers that question. I think there was one more that I saw that I lent a hand with. It said, do I need to be interviewed again if I get booked with a school other than the initial interview? Yeah, I think in short, the answer to that is no, especially if it's a daily supply. This would have all been done before you go into the school, because you have to be verified, and that is what we were talking about earlier, making sure your profile is complete as it can be, so that schools can then book you. I don't know if anything else I want to add. If you want to add to that, Mick, or
no, I think you're right. If you're going for a daily supply role, there won't be an interview. If you're going for a long-term role, it's quite likely the school will ask you for an interview. Maybe it's a trial day, trial half day, just a conversation with the head. So if it's a longer-term role, so we're talking, half a term all the way up to an academic year, then yes, there will probably be some interview. But shorter than that, then the interview is totally covered by us at Zen. And so even with the long-term roles, it's sort of a top-up interview, because they've already seen your profile, your references, and your CV because of them finding you on the app. And a couple more quick ones. Someone again asked about changing references if they've made a mistake. Again, you can either contact your point person at Zen who's been helping you with in the process, or you can email support@zeneducate.com to make that change, and someone will get onto that. A really good question about references here for people who have had a history in working through supply agencies. It says, I've been doing supply work with an agency, so I've been employed by the agency, not the school, so who do I ask for a reference? And I think this is probably coming off the back of me saying we'd like references from head teachers and senior leaders are good references. It's really, really fine to get a reference or even just a statement of work from a teaching agency that you've worked with. That's fine. They'll say, Jason was employed at this date to this date. He's worked in 70 schools in London, making up 400 days of work over the last 5 years, or whatever it is. That's totally good. All we need to see on that reference is that there aren't any safeguarding or disciplinary concerns. That's really, really crucial. So they'll say, yep, you've been working and he's not an issue to have in the classroom. That's fine. If you got that reference from an agency and another reference from an agency, we'll probably ask for another one, because those two are just statements of work. We would need someone in leadership at a school. So maybe even if you did 2 weeks or a month at a school and you think you had a real impact there, see if you can get the contact details of one of the leaders at the school and get them to give you a reference. Just so the 2-year period is covered by the agency reference, and there's one that just gives a little bit more information about you, so that your references say more than just, yes, he worked and he's not a problem, because those are pretty weak as references go. Acceptable, but not very strong. And I think that is that, except for this last one. Sorry, I keep landing the plane and then taking it off again, but this is the last one, I promise you. If I'm self-employed and want to join Zen Educate, who can I use as my reference? That's a really good question. The best thing to do there is to get some of your clients to provide a reference. So again, it must cover a 2-year period, it must be professional, which is why we'd say go for someone who you've been contracting to for as long a period as possible as the main reference, and then whoever else can supplement that to make up the 2-year period. That would be a good way to do it if you're self-employed. And I think that covers that. All right, just a last little slide here, just to refresh your memories about Zen and just about who we are. We're a social enterprise. We're a tech platform. We're not a traditional agency. We're trying to take away the middleman, cut down on agency fees so that schools are saving money. We've actually now just passed the mark of saving schools £2 million. So that little blue sticker is out of date. As of yesterday, we're now past £2 million saved by schools, whoop, whoop, which is pretty exciting. And we're aiming to put simplicity and control into your hands by using the app. We're aiming to have smart matching happen so that things happen quickly and efficiently for you and for schools. And hopefully, in most cases, when we were cutting out the middleman and cutting out agency fees, the pay will result in being slightly higher for you and less for schools. In other words, they're paying less, which is why they're saving monies. And so saving money, I think I said monies, that's not a good word. Saving money, there we go. So that's a bit about Zen. And we just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. This is the end of the webinar, and we hope that it was helpful and enlightening for you. And it's been a pleasure to have you here. And yes, for people, just sending messages, it's been a real pleasure. And don't forget, we will be sending you a summary of this in a blog post, and the video to this, and the slides will be coming to you in an email on Monday. So you will be getting all of this. But it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for all the nice messages coming in, and have a lovely afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Everybody.